Merry Christmas and welcome to Wavescan, the international DX program from Adventist World Radio. Researched and written by Dr. Adrian Peterson in Indianapolis and produced in the studios of WRMI Shortwave in Miami, Florida. I'm Jeff White. On this pre-Christmas edition of Wavescan, which by the way is edition number 200, we have Radio Afghanistan returns to the air on shortwave, part 7. Target broadcasting into Afghanistan, and our Australian DX report from Bob Padula. In our program today, we return to the radio broadcasting scene in that landlocked country in Western Asia, Afghanistan. We have come almost to our recent era, just before and just after the recent turn of the century, and in particular we examine the story of target broadcasting into Afghanistan. At that particular time, we discover that the radio broadcasting scene in Afghanistan was one of utter chaos and confusion. Large stations and small stations in other countries were beaming their programming into that needy country on shortwave and medium wave, and lots of radio stations, large and small, were on the air within the country under all sorts of names and titles. At times, there have been 2 different stations on the air under the same identification slogan, and on other occasions, stations have been on the air with almost identical slogans. As a background setting to this era of international radio confusion, we note that the BBC London increased its programming into Afghanistan in the 2 national languages, Dari and Pashto, with transmissions from high-powered shortwave transmitters located in England, the Mediterranean, Asia, and the Middle East. Likewise, so did Deutsche Welle, with the usage of relay transmitters in the Middle East, Africa, and Asia.
Deutsche Welle
بخشداری برنامه افغانستان صدای آلمان.
سلام بر شما شنونده عزیز. امیدوارم در یک لحظه خوب و خوشتان به شما پیوسته باشیم.
A snippet there of Deutsche Welle and their evening broadcast in Dari to Afghanistan. China Radio International, with studios in Beijing and high-powered transmitters at 3 different locations within China, produced special programming beamed into Afghanistan, as did the Voice of Russia, with studios in Moscow and transmitters at several different locations in Russia itself and in Tajikistan also. In countries nearby, special programming was produced and beamed into the stricken country on both medium wave and shortwave. Radio Pakistan was noted, with programming specifically for Afghanistan on medium wave and shortwave from Peshawar, and from the Islamabad high power site over transmitter API 9 at 100 kilowatts. All India Radio also produced special programming in their Delhi studios and beamed the service westward from 4 different shortwave sites at 250 and 500 kilowatts. We could mention similar endeavors on the part of many different international broadcasting organizations in many different countries, such as Radio Cairo in Egypt, the Voice of Iran in Tehran, the Voice of Turkey in Ankara, and the Voice of Tajik in Tajikistan. Likewise, FIBA Radio, Trans World Radio, and HCJB Global also prepared special programming for coverage into Afghanistan. The United States increased its radio coverage into Afghanistan with the creation of what we might call special radio stations. The Voice of America split its programming into 4 different streams with programming as Radio Diva or Radio Light on medium wave in Afghanistan and shortwave relays, Radio Ashna, VOA, on medium wave in Afghanistan and shortwave relays, VOA News Now, and VOA itself, with regular programming via many relays on shortwave and medium wave. Likewise, Radio Liberty, Radio Free Europe, introduced 2 new streams of programming for Afghanistan. These were Radio Mashal, or Radio Torch, on medium wave in Afghanistan and shortwave relays, and Radio Azadi, or Radio Free Afghanistan, via multiple relays. The American welfare organization USAID installed at least 2 medium wave stations in Afghanistan. One was located at Bamiyan, the valley where once stood the 2 huge Buddhist statues carved into the abrupt hillside, and the other was at Jalalabad, just across the border from the famed Khyber Pass. To further complicate the issue, there was a Radio Afghanistan in the north and a Radio Afghanistan in Kabul, and a Voice of Afghanistan in Armenia. There was a Radio Amani, or Radio Peace, in Kabul, and a Radio Peace on shortwave in Russia, and a Radio Sol, Radio Peace, based in France. There was a Radio Free Kabul and a Radio Free Afghanistan. There was a Radio Freedom and a Radio Message of Freedom, and so the story goes on. An organization in Denmark planned on establishing 2 rather low-powered medium-wave stations, both at 200 watts, for coverage into Afghanistan. Their plan was to install one station at Peshawar and another in Quetta, both in the edge of Pakistan, and beam the programming into the 2 neighboring Afghan cities, Jalalabad and Kandahar. Radio Pakistan itself opened a new service into the neighboring areas of Afghanistan from Peshawar. This station was on the air on both medium wave and shortwave as Nava-e-Dost, the voice of a friend. The medium wave unit was listed with 300 kilowatts on 540 kilohertz. We should also mention the usage of the airplane stations that were flown in from Pennsylvania in the United States. A total of 6 of these airplane radio broadcasting stations is available, and we would suggest that probably 3 were flown over to the Afghanistan area. Transmitter power is listed at 10 kilowatts. Around mid-October 2001, these airplane broadcasts were first noted, and these transmissions were heard on 3 different channels on medium wave: 864 kilohertz, 980 kilohertz, and 1107 kilohertz. The 2 channels 864 and 1107 kilohertz are Asian channels at the 9 kilohertz allocations and normally in use at Kandahar and Kabul. The 980 kilohertz transmission seems to represent an American channel at a 10 kilohertz allocation. Radio monitoring observations indicated that the ground-based programming for the transmitters in the airplane service was broadcast on 8700 kilohertz USB upper sideband, but the location of this feeder relay has never been determined. The planes were on the air with programming under the title Information Radio. When the planes returned to the United States half a year later, the broadcasts of Information Radio were taken over by a mobile Army unit at Kandahar. The technical equipment and studio were installed into 4 Humvee vehicles and placed under a tent. 2 transmitters were in use at this temporary facility, a 1 kilowatt shortwave unit on 6100 kilohertz, and a medium wave unit at 5 kilowatts on 864 kilohertz. You've just heard episode number 7 in the sequential story of radio broadcasting in Afghanistan, spanning thus far some 87 years. We plan to conclude the Afghan story early in the new year with the installation of the rather new shortwave transmitter provided by the Indian government.
You're listening to Wavescan from Adventist World Radio. Send your comments and reception reports to Wavescan, Box 29235, Indianapolis, Indiana 46229 in the United States. That's Wavescan, Box 29235, Indianapolis, Indiana 46229 in the USA. Or you can email us at wavescan@awr.org. Our email once again, wavescan@awr.org.
Greetings to shortwave enthusiasts around the world. This is Bob Padula in Melbourne, Victoria, Australia, with another edition of the Australian DX Report. These magazines provide news of shortwave broadcasting stations, monitoring summaries, propagation news, and other information concerning world international broadcasting. As I start to remind you that full detail QSLs are available for correct reports received for these episodes, the address will be given at the end of the program. And a note that all times, days and dates given in our episodes are in UTC, and we use the 24-hour time system. The episodes are compiled from resources made available by the Electronic De-Express Radio Monitoring Association, which is based here in Melbourne.
We have lots of information this time in our program. First of all, information from the Ionospheric Prediction Service in Sydney, New South Wales here in Australia concerning solar activity. The IPS reports that solar activity is now classified as low. The 10.7 centimetre solar radio flux has fallen to 95, and the daily equivalent smooth sunspot number has dropped to 41. Now, those figures are not expected to change significantly in the immediate future. So it just means that high frequency propagation over long distance paths above about 12 megahertz from various continents using multi-hop propagation will not be very reliable, but propagation on frequencies below 12 megahertz on darkness or semi-darkness paths will be satisfactory. Now, first of all, some information concerning international shortwave broadcasting schedules. The World Radio Television Handbook, edition number 67, has now been published from the UK. This new edition is 674 pages, and of particular note is the theme of declining high-frequency broadcasting in favour of cellular, mobile and internet streaming, and technical problems with DRM high frequency. The feature section this year in the handbook has a look at some classic 1990s DSP receivers, reviews of the latest equipment, an article on DXing on Curacao, news of the Children's Radio Foundation, a visit to the Khmer Post Radio, and much more, including the regular digital update and George Jacobs' excellent propagation section. The remaining pages are full of the usual information, including national and international broadcasts, clandestine and other target broadcasters, medium wave and shortwave frequency listings, terrestrial television by country, and an extensive reference section. Now, the handbook may be ordered from your usual supplier or distributor. It's also available directly from the United Kingdom publisher, and their website is very simple, wrth.com. If you go to that website, there's an order form there with details of pricing and how you can pay for and buy the book direct. The book is also being made available through the Amazon American company, and a credit card will be required for purchases from Amazon, but the estimated delivery time or release time from Amazon is mid-January. So that's the details of the World Radio TV Handbook, the edition number 67 and the year 2013. So it's really an indispensable reference to anybody with an interest in shortwave, medium wave, long wave radio or television or FM worldwide. Now, some information concerning broadcasters themselves. First of all, Cuba. Radio Havana, Cuba has introduced a new frequency of 11880, 25 metre band. It's in use for programs to Africa between 2100 and 2130 in French, 2130 to 2200 in Portuguese, and 2200 to 2300 in English. The frequency choice is not very satisfactory, as the same channel is being used by NHK Radio Japan from its Monsenary station in French Guiana for its Portuguese program to Africa, also at 2130 to 2200. So there's a problem there that authorities will have to sort out, because that co-channel interference is quite severe in the African target area. Now, some propagation notes from here in Melbourne. The overall daytime afternoon pattern has changed remarkably in recent weeks as compared with previous summers. The Asian short path mode is now active on 9 MHz and 11 MHz for transmitters further to the west of Melbourne and north of Melbourne, such as in Sri Lanka, Iran, Central Asia, Kuwait and India. This transmission pattern is believed to be via combined E and F layer propagation, and more work is needed in studying this phenomenon. The traditional midday Asian mode on 6, 7 and 9 MHz hasn't yet appeared. This is a specialised mode via a combination of E, F1, F2 and reflection off the top side of sporadic E clouds above northern Australia. And that specialised mode usually becomes apparent during the hotter periods of the East Australian summer. Now, between 0315 and 0400, some interesting notes are noted. This is from a place called the Warrandyte State Park. It's on the Yarra River. That's the main river that flows through Melbourne, about 15 kilometres from the central Melbourne city, using a little Eaton E5 receiver and a small 3-metre antenna. And these are some of the signals. On 9475, the Voice of Russia from Dushanbe in Tajikistan in Spanish at 0315. 9500, the Voice of the Islamic Republic of Iran, signing on at 0330 in Arabic. 9610, Adventist World Radio from the Wertachtal site in Germany, with Amharic programming at 0330. And 9750, the Voice of Russia from Yerevan in Armenia, Spanish programming to sign off at 0400. And 9850, the People's Broadcasting Station at Jining, Qinghai, in the Tibetan program language. Abrupt fade in at 0350, and this is possibly a variant or a precursor to our Asian summer daytime mode. Now, between 0315 and 0400, these signals were noted. 11730, the Voice of Korea in Spanish from Pyongyang. 11850, Radio Romania International in Spanish from Bucharest. 11925, the BBC from the Oman relay station in Persian, signing on at 0330. 11950, China, the People's Broadcasting Station Xiang in Lhasa with the Chinese network. And 11990, an interesting frequency usage, the Voice of America via the Santa Maria de Galleria relay station in the Vatican in Somali, opening transmissions at 0330. And on 12005, the Voice of America carrying the Radio Diwa program in Pashto, that's from Sri Lanka, from Iranavilla. And 12025, Radio Liberty from the Kuwait relay station in Uzbek, and some frequencies for China National Radio Network 1, 11630, 12045 and 12055. Again, 11785, China Radio International in English from the Kashi transmitting site, and China National Radio Network 2 in Chinese on 11845, and they were all heard between 0315 and 04. Now some sunrise reception patterns here in Melbourne recently in the 19 metre band. This is between 1750 and 1815. And this is a summary of some of the signals which were monitored. The Saudi Arabia Broadcasting Service on 3 frequencies in the 19 metre band with Arabic, 15205, 15235 and 15435, all signing off at 1800. Radio Kuwait with its English language programs on 15540 at 1750, and the Voice of America from Botswana in Portuguese on 15670, noted at around 1815. And in the 16 metre band, 17640, the BBC from the Mayerton relay station in South Africa, English programming between 1800 and 1830. So some surprising high frequency signals there in the 19 and 16 metre bands in our sunrise period here in Melbourne between 1750 and 1800.
That's all we have time for in our episode of the Australian DX Report, which came to you from Melbourne in Victoria, Australia. I'd just like to remind you that we offer full detail QSL cards showing Australian scenes and wildlife for correct reports received for these broadcasts. We also offer an email QSL service for reports sent via the internet or email. Full details about the QSL service are available at the Electronic DXpress homepage, which is simply edxp.org. So until our next program, this is Bob Padula in Melbourne in Victoria, Australia, wishing you all good listening. Thanks for being with us and good DX. See you soon.
Thanks, Bob. And finally on Wavescan today, we have an update on the construction of a new shortwave station, PCJ, in Taiwan, managed by Keith Perrone. This comes to us from Mike Terry of the British DX Club via Jerry Berg. And Keith writes on Facebook, I want to let you know how the construction of PCJ's 20-kilowatt station is coming along. The slowness of having it built has to do with weather and technical factors. For example, we need to have an auxiliary transmitter with a minimum power output of 5 kilowatts. In February, I'm heading to RIS transmitters in Croatia, where we're getting it from, to finalize the deal. We also need by law a diesel generator as a backup. We got it this summer, and it's sitting in storage, and an overhaul of it will take place at the beginning of 2013. The antenna masts, by law, are going to be erected to withstand earthquakes of 8.5 and must follow construction codes for typhoons and katabatic winds, which the area is known for. I can tell you the launch broadcast will be something never heard before, and that's all I can say on that. The program content will be PCJ programming, with some programs being expanded. Focus Asia Pacific will go from 30 minutes weekly to 2 one-hour daily programs. 2 hours a day of PCJ programming will be in English, 2 hours daily in Chinese, and 1 hour daily in Indonesian. The rest of the schedule will be live relays of Radio Australia. Daytime hours will be targeting the Pacific, with late afternoon and evenings targeting East and Southeast Asia. Each hour, even PCJ hours, will have 5 minutes of news on the hour from Radio Australia. Each hour will be 58 minutes and 30 seconds. The other minute and 20 seconds will be the PCJ interval and frequency announcement. Procession number 4 for Natural Trumpet will be played on the hour. This is how it will sound. The interval signal there and top of the hour music for PCJ Radio. Coming soon, or hopefully soon, from the island of Taiwan. And Keith Perrone says there are some other things going on as well, but I want to keep it as a surprise. We have some special Christmas music to end the program today. This is a song called Noche de Paz, or Silent Night, from a group, a duet here in Miami, known as Eden. Two Latin girls who live here in Miami. Domenica Brazzi, she was born in Peru, and Mari Carmen, who was born in Cuba. They both live here in Miami and have a duet called Eden. Well, thank you for listening to Wavescan, the weekly DX program from Adventist World Radio, researched and written in Indianapolis by Adrian Peterson. We want to tell you about one of the places that you can hear Wavescan each week, and that's KSDA, the Adventist World Radio station in Agat, Guam. You can hear Wavescan Sundays at 1600 UTC on 11825 and 15360 kilohertz. Sunday at 1630 UTC on 11740, and Sunday at 2230 UTC on 15320 kilohertz, all of them with 100 kilowatts from KSDA in Guam. Well, next week will be our last program for the old year, 2012. We'll have the story of radio broadcasting in Ceylon, Part 7, Radio SEAC takes to the air, and our Indian DX report. A reminder that we have QSL cards available for reports on this program. You can send them to Wavescan, Box 29235, Indianapolis, Indiana, 46229, USA. That's Wavescan, Box 29235, Indianapolis, Indiana, 46229, USA. Our email address is wavescan@awr.org. That's Wavescan, awr.org. Christmas greetings from our editor Adrian Peterson, myself Jeff White, our studio engineer Javier Garcia, and everyone who brings you Wavescan each week. We end now with the music of Eden and Silent Night. They stopped by our studios the other day and left this CD with us. Very nice music. Merry Christmas and Feliz Navidad from Miami.
La estrella de paz.